Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And Will Terry cannot be here today because he is out on assignment.
He's in Alaska. He's in Alaska ice fishing for a rare guppy.
That just rolled right off the tongue, didn't it? Let's start over. Be thinking.
It's the only fish.
A rare guppy. You know, there's so many. There's
That's
trout.
Perfect. No, the guppy is literally the only fish that I could think of. There was no plan B.
Okay. Interesting. So we'll have him return and report on that whenever he's back. See if he got that guppy. No, today we got a special guest. We're interviewing Brandon Jeffords, or having a conversation with him. Brandon Jeffords. He's a animation film director. That's his current job. But I've known him for years. We met many years ago, worked together, and it's just been so fun to like watch the trajectory of his career grow. And I figured we had Steven Silver last interview talk about TV animation. It'd be interesting to have Brandon here to tell us about feature animation and kind of explore that world with us.
Is it weird takeaways? To see somebody like you started? Well, you started at the same time as he did, so that was interesting for me to hear. Is it weird to see somebody so much more successful than you are that started at the same spot?
Lee,
sorry, that was too easy.
every day I'm just faced with the weirdness of seeing people's success. The thing is he's like 10, 15 years older than me. So there's still a chance I could direct an animated film. No, he's not that much. He's not that much older than me.
No, there was some great takeaways from him. He's a very talented person. You know, I didn't know a ton about his background before the interview, so I'm kind of checking him out while we're talking to him. He's just got this big, broad skill set. He's sort of exactly like what you, Will, and I always talk about. He could do anything he wants, really.
Right.
And it's just whichever thing he does want, he can actually choose. And he seems to gravitate towards story, but he's just sort of good at all of it. Which that's amazing. But then also his path is a meandering path, as I'm learning all of ours sort of are.
What's interesting about Brandon is I remember very early on, he's like, I want to direct animated films. And at the time I was like, good luck. There's like maybe 20 people who are able to do that. So you go have fun, follow that path. And then step by step, year by year, he took all the right steps to get up to that point. And you know, he says he had a big break. He sort of had a lucky break, but that would not have happened if he hadn't been doing the right things that he needed to do. And it's also like a testament to focusing and figuring out what it is you want to do. And like, you know, when you're an artist, you can almost do anything you want. There's so many different options, so many different paths to be able to do with this. And there's something to be said about picking one thing and just going for it, you know? And and he's a good example of that. So, well, let's get right into the interview with him then. You want to tell us what like where you're at right now, what your job is, and then we'll just kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah, are we rolling? Are we on? Are we
we're rolling.
Oh, good.
This episode is going.
Oh, awesome. Wow, we really just went into it.
It's just hot. We just go right in.
So I'm at Warner Brothers right now directing it's a like HBO streaming animated movie, but I don't know if I can talk about it yet. In fact, I hate these like blurred backgrounds, but that's one of the reasons why I did it, is because I've got all my material behind me. So, you know,
don't disclose anything you can't.
I guess I could say I'm working with some beloved characters. I'll just say that
at Warner Brothers.
At Warner Brothers. So,
Ah.
but yeah, I mean, that's my current status. I'll be on this project for another, hopefully, year and a half or so on it. So, and it's been a lot of fun.
How long have you been doing that for?
It's only been a few months, and we're actually like, it's funny because like I'm at Warner Brothers Animation. So there's two sort of Warner Brothers like big families, and now Discovery is part of it all, if you follow the news. But there's Warner Brothers Animation Group, and there's Warner Brothers Animation, and Warner Brothers Animation generally does the television stuff, but obviously they're doing feature stuff now. Mm-hmm. And so the whole like system is different, and we're actually trying to get people to come into work, which isn't happening a lot in LA. I know around the world it might be different, but here it's like, wait, we can come into work. It's like the Munchkins coming out in
Wizard of Oz
coming out, yeah, after the Wicked Witch's house fell, down. So yeah, it's odd, but it's really cool because a lot of these television folk too haven't done the sort of feature collaboration that we try to do, where you just get everybody in a room and talk about the scenes, and so it's a learning curve all around, just like being in person, and then actually, oh wait, I can contribute my ideas to this thing. I don't just have to follow exactly what's in the script. So it's a lot of fun, actually, just opening this world up to these people.
Yeah. So you're directing a film, and this isn't your first rodeo, right? This is
let's give us a little what's the rundown of the films that you've worked on and the stuff that the big stuff.
Yeah. So back in the day, I worked on a thing called Freebirds, which was I think that was probably the first feature that I worked on. It was called Time Turkeys at the time. A real effects movie. Oh wait, but before that I did, back when DVDs were still a thing, a straight to DVD movie called Open Season 2, Open Season 3.
Open season stuff.
So yeah, right. And a lot of people are like, wait, they did a second and a third one? But that's what we do at the beginning of our careers, is just sort of cut our teeth on the stuff that nobody's paying attention to. And then eventually, the people that I worked with on open season sequels, they were doing a Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs sequel at Sony. And they called me over. I thought, okay, a job interview. And it was just like, they just told me all about the movie and asked me when I could start. So it was super exciting. And then just on a fluke, their head of story fell out of that project, and they were looking for somebody. So that one I consider my first feature, because it was really my first big job. And then I got head of story like immediately. For anybody that doesn't know what head of story is, it's the one that kind of oversees the storyboarding. All the storyboard artists oversees that crew. Generally, they end up doing most of the storyboarding on the movie. But yeah, it was a trial by fire for sure on that one. So Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, I kind of lucked into that head of story position. And I think that just sort of like pushed my career into turbo boost. I was at Sony for about 10 years. I worked on a lot of stuff there. Hotel Transylvania 2, I worked on, consulted on some other stuff, but
Smurfs,
Lost Village. I worked on Popeye for a little bit when it was actually in,
pre-production
before it got canned. No, it was, they were literally making it, but
wow.
It eventually got canned. And then, so Smurfs, I got to be head of story again under Kelly Asbury. And then after that, Kirk D'Amico asked me to come on as head of story on Vivo, but I like to think that he was just sort of courting me, because eventually I kept talking to my wife, and I was like, I wonder if I could ask him if he would, let me be co-director, but it was like that awkward sort of dating thing where you're like, should I hold her hand, and
do you like me? Check yes or check no. Do you want to go out?
Exactly. And luckily,
slide a little piece of notebook paper over to him in a meeting.
Check yes. Yeah. If you like me, check yes. So yeah, he actually brought it up himself. He's like, just in passing, he's like, you want to be co-director on this thing? I was like, oh yeah. So that's all she wrote. So that was my last one. Vivo was the Lin-Manuel Miranda musical animated extravaganza that came out last year and then was swallowed up by all the hype on Encanto. I mean, we were supposed to be a theatrical release on that, and then with COVID and all the fears of sending things out in the theater, it went to Netflix. Such a beautiful movie. I mean, I wish everybody could have seen it in the theater.
Why? How did Encanto swallowed up?
It was another Lin-Manuel Miranda musical, and it was theatrical release, and it was Disney. So
I see. Yeah.
Even our, the head executives at Columbia were like, that you throw down the Disney or the Pixar card, and that's your ace up your sleeve. Mm-hmm. It's like you can't compete with that, and none of them wanted to compete with that. So
they're like, we better cut our losses and just do a Netflix release, and because it costs money to actually put it in theaters. It's not just like, let's release it in theaters and there's no, like, you got to promote it in theaters. There's a whole marketing angle. You've got to
the distribution. Like I've heard that it's about half of a movie's budget to market a film globally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's say you do $100 million film, it's like $50 million to market it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you got to figure, from a business standpoint, should we sell this to Netflix and automatically know what our profit is going to be, or should we roll the dice? And at the time, it was like LAX mm-hmm. with a ton of like jumbo jetliners waiting to land on whatever weekend you were going to land. All those movies were up there saying, okay, that's going to be our week. So you never knew where you were going to put your movie and what it was mm-hmm. up against. Mm-hmm. And at the time they were all giants. So
yeah. Did Disney do a dirty, or were they like they knew that you had this film and knew it was competition? Or
I don't know. I mean, look, it's so weird because we showed the film to Disney beforehand, because when we were shopping it around for streaming, so they got a free front row seat to our movie before it ever saw the light of day.
Yeah.
And look, if I was a business person, I would have been like, we knew there was a shot across the bow early in the year when they put out a teaser for theirs, and we had nothing out for ours, like no promo, and we were already sweating it. And their promo was literally like an environment with a butterfly flying through it and just like the tease of a song, and it just said Columbia is all it said, right?
Yeah.
And we were like, oh man, they know that we're coming. They know that we're a Lin-Manuel Miranda musical, and they're just going, all right, let's see how you can compete with us,
They had to change the words from "we don't talk about Vivo" to "we don't talk about Bruno."
Exactly. So yeah, that's the game we play, and it was.
It's interesting because last week we interviewed Steven Silver, mm-hmm. and he's in the TV animation side of things, and you're in the feature animation side of things. You've done both. What would you say is like the difference between the two? If someone's like, I want to get into animation, there's this big world of animation. What's the difference, and why did you choose to ultimately be a feature animator or a feature storyboard artist, or to go that direction?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference I think is the length of time on the show.
Mhm.
Certainly creatively, it's such a different process. And what I'm doing right now is a little bit of a hybrid because it's a lower budget and it's a faster paced schedule.
Mhm.
But these features, I mean, Vivo was 4 years long on that. So there's a little job security there, but
Yeah.
it also is, I mean, if you're one of those that first of all loves doing gags, loves doing humor, and wants to see your work on screen, then television is probably more fulfilling for you because
Mhm.
you generally don't have too many iterations on something.
Mhm.
You know, there's some shows have a little more creative freedom, others don't, but that's generally the difference is when you're so sick of throwing sequences away or stuff that you pitch that morning and the writer already comes to you and says, I rewrote the entire thing, which happens in feature. Some people just like, I got to go do television for a while just to cleanse the palate because
Right.
this was insane. But for me, the reason I gravitated towards feature is because I like the long format. My brain just loves arcing a character over a couple hours.
Mhm.
Certainly now in television, they're doing that over seasons. So that's way more gratifying. So the lines are starting to get blurred a little bit between those two industries, certainly with streaming. But I like the long format stuff. It's more thinking. I'm a little bit more of a cerebral story guy. I'm not as much of a gag person. So, you know, that's where I like to spin my wheels. I'm okay with throwing a lot of material away and doing that, what Andrew Stanton called the archaeological dig for the right story. And I do think generally features dig into more profound themes.
Do you want to explain the Andrew Stanton quote?
Well, Andrew Stanton, who's the Pixar director that did Finding Nemo.
John Carter of Mars. Don't forget that.
Ouch.
I think he wants.
That's his big hit, his real big hit. Not the fish movie.
He's still trying to forget that one. Anyway, he's a brilliant storyteller. I actually saw him speak the beginning of my career, very inspiring, but he talked about story being like an archaeological dig. You know, it's not you don't find it right away. It's this constant like searching. And sometimes you find that you're searching in the wrong area and you have to completely change, pivot your entire story to find what you need to find. It's not plug and play. Andrew Stanton wrote, and so animation, a guy that came from animation wrote the entire script for Finding Nemo. None of that ended up in the final film. You would think that you could just like write a script and go, boom, here you go. But,
how do you find with that process? How do you save it from the sort of having too many cooks in the kitchen type environment that dilutes a good story? How do you keep the archaeological dig moving forward instead of just spreading all over the place?
Yeah, I think the only way to do that is to have people in power, executive positions that are filmmakers, particularly animation filmmakers, because it's such a different process. It has to be a different process. It's just the way that it's built. And unless you have those people that are checking, because feature is such a slow process over years, people get sick of material. They don't realize the freshness, the objectivity is lost. And so you do have to have people that have vision and hopefully people that either protect the filmmakers or are filmmakers themselves. That's
the Andrew Stanton thing, the way I remember it, because I think it sheds light on this a little bit more, is that you have an idea for a movie and you take it to your investors or the producers or whoever. And in the archaeological dig, it'd be like, hey, we found what we got this bone here. We think we've got ourselves a T-Rex. And so we need funding to like finish digging out this T-Rex. And they're like, sweet, let's go do it. You know, here's your money. And as you get into it, you start digging, you start pulling more bones out and you realize, oh, this is a Stegosaurus. You start putting it together and you realize, oh, I got to go back and say, no, we're actually building a Stegosaurus. And what he said was at Pixar, they will say, all right, well, let's release a Stegosaurus and we'll put that up in the museum. And a lot of these other studios are like, you promised a T-Rex. So you have to then turn your Stegosaurus bones into a T-Rex somehow. And that's how you get those weird movies where you're like, that wasn't satisfying at all.
That's smart. That's smart. Yeah. I've never heard it that way, but that's absolutely true for sure. So
I've always wondered what it would be like to be on one of those. Sorry, Jake. To be on one of those movies that starts out as a T-Rex and then all of a sudden starts changing, and and they try to get both, right? You promised us a T-Rex, but we got this other weird thing, but you're an artist on there, or you're working on it in some capacity, and you know that the thing has now turned south, and the story's diluted or it's changed, but now you still got 2 years on it. I've always wondered how that is to sit with that, knowing that it started good and now it's not. And how do you bring freshness to it every day, knowing that the decisions are kind of hurting it from that point on?
Well, I think that's two different things, because I think what Jake is saying is that the T-Rex isn't the Triceratops or whatever, that's not a bad thing. It's where the story wanted to go. Right.
So, no, I understand that one, but when they're trying to morph it into both, accomplish a lot of different stuff, and you know those films you're watching, you're like, wait, what story are they trying to tell here? It's kind of goes into like almost too many storylines, or it's not wrapping up in a satisfying way. I just wonder how that is to be an artist working on that and know that I know some movies probably start out amazing and then they get watered down because they don't have that kind of vision from the beginning, or that power at the top that sees what the true potential is.
Well, Jake can probably attest to this. Story artists are a bunch of grumpy people. I mean, just angsty, grumpy people. We used to just joke because at Sony, like the development side, the artists that were doing the visual development for the film, like they were always just like better looking. They were like the
spring
superstar.
in their step.
Oh yeah, just like, oh, no worries, another portfolio piece. Oh, it's not in the movie. That's okay. It's still beautiful. But the story artists, just like, we were always just like, I can't believe they're doing this. Yeah. And so our lunches were just gripe sessions. It was like, if anyone was like, well, we don't take work to lunch, it's like, forget about it. Story artists carry it home with them. It's like, it's constant just churning of like, if I was doing it, I'd do it way better, And so
that's great.
I don't know if I've seen a completely healthy story crew anywhere. But those movies that end up, the T-Rex that wants to morph into a Triceratops or vice versa, like often the directors get fired and they find a director that will do it. I mean, the upper people a lot of times just either they just go with the flow. I've seen these directors that are just like, hey, just tell me what you want to do, I'll do it, and they seem to have like job security. And then so the secret there is like you have to just like forget your soul while you're at work and just like
got to fit 5 more fart jokes in there. And you need an emoji joke. Okay, we'll do that.
Dude, it's so true. Like I've seen these directors that can do that. And I'm like, but how? Like, do you separate yourself from the material? I mean, that you're not doing what is truly the best. So
I had it described to me too. I was actually listening to a live stream of another filmmaker, and he said, and this might work for animation, but he was talking about Hollywood more so. And he said, to be a movie director, you have to have incredible networking skills, incredible like self-marketing skills, promotional skills. And he said, and then on top of that, if you actually are a good storyteller, that's when you have these directors who can make really good movies. but oftentimes it's just the person put in a director role is like the storytelling aspect or the craft aspect is sort of subservient to able to be in the right room, have the right personality, say yes to the right kind of people. So he said it's a real, like, you think about, the directors that make a dang good movie, like a Christopher Nolan or or a David Fincher or something like that. And those are primarily directors who know how to network and know how to promote themselves and know how to get the funding and get the money. I don't know. Does that track with animation, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, even more so with animation, because I think like a Fincher or a Scorsese, like they get to the point where, you have the clout. So it's no longer about the salesmanship and it's more about the name. And with animation, I mean, first of all, who wants to be an animation director? It's so like, there's no glitz and glamour. People don't even know what you do. They're like, wait, there's directors on those things. Like, what are you directing? So it's just kind of a silly thing. I mean, how many animation directors do you know if you're just average Joe on the street? I mean, the only one that I can think of that they might know is Lasseter. And that's just because they may have heard his name, but they don't even know like what he directed. I mean, for us, we're just like, oh, we can throw out those names left and right, but
that's true. I'm thinking you said average Joe and I forgot, like, maybe my wife would only know a John Lasseter or Miyazaki,
Brad Bird,
or a Brad Bird.
My wife and my kids are it. Like they know those. But if you said Brad Bird to just the average person on the street, they would be like, I don't know who that is. The Incredibles. So yeah, it's like, it's not. Well, I
haven't seen The Incredibles. I don't have kids. That's your average person.
Yeah, you have the Pixar group that kind of had this like this place in time where they built this studio with filmmakers, and the filmmakers were the ones running the studio, and they had enough people empowering them to do it. So I think in that case, that line gets blurred a little bit. Your Pete Doctors who are really just like children that never grew up and have these like grand sort of dreamlike ideas. And you're like, man, we got to put this guy in a film. I don't know if he would survive outside that environment. I don't know. I've never worked with him, but I just know of a little bit of what I've heard of him and his ideas. And I'm like, I wonder if that success would have been the same outside of that environment.
So you graduated from art school and then just signed up for the director position, and that's like kind of how you got into that.
Yeah.
Help wanted that.
I know you're being a bit tongue in cheek just because you actually were around during part of that growth process of trying to find things. I mean, I
got to be there on day one of Brandon's big break.
You were
his first big boy job, right?
I think you were day 2 actually, because you started a day before me, right?
That's right. So I was there a day before. So me and Brandon, I'll just say this: we met each other in 2003 at Real Effects in Dallas, and they had were expanding their art department, and they said, and I showed up for work on the day that they told us to show up for work, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to drop pictures. And they're like, well, this other guy, Brandon, he won't be making it in. He had you had an accident while moving or something. Anyways, I've always held that over him.
I did. I remember I broke my pinky.
I thought you stabbed yourself in the thigh.
No, that was a different move.
Okay. Anyway, I always was like, I've worked here longer, so that's why it was always just one day. But I want people to know that this road from going to art school to becoming a director wasn't necessarily straight, and it wasn't necessarily fast. or efficient, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I hear these, I teach at USC, University of Southern California, storyboarding. And it's always, that's the big question. How do I break into the industry? How do I break into the industry? And most of the time I'm just like, man, you're young. Like, just give it some time, find it. Because I mean, most everybody that I know that really broke into a good job, the one that they wanted, were, late 20s, 30s, before they actually really found their stride. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when I graduated, I started working at a newspaper back when people were still getting newspapers delivered to their houses. And I was an illustrator on staff with them doing editorial illustration. I mean, I was in Florida. It was the furthest from Hollywood, making movies that you possibly could be, even though I knew I wanted to do that. At one point, on a whim, because I was so impatient, I latched onto another job that I wanted just to get out of there. And I ended up losing that. And next thing I knew, I was driving taxi. So, I mean, let this be a lesson to you kids. No,
I love that you went to Ringling and you worked at you drive taxi from the airport to the school, right?
Yeah, there was one very dark period in my life where I was driving kids from the airports to the school that I graduated from. Oh, wow. They were starting school.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how'd the conversation go in the car?
That conversation was very quiet. That was when your taxi driver says nothing to you and just drives you to your place. But yeah, it's these war stories that we carry close to our hearts. It actually was very shortly after that I got the job at Real Effects. I spoke to Limbert Fabian, who is an incredible artist, by the way, and business runner now. What I don't know exactly what. Yeah, but
a studio runner or something like that, right?
Limbert was one of my illustration teachers at Ringling. And then he was working at Real Effects and he was my job contact. And I talked to him on the phone when I applied and he was like, so we saw your portfolio. We like it. And of course he had known me from school and he's like, what are you doing now? And I told him I was driving taxi and he was like, not anymore. He's like, you're coming out here. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, that was,
I remember too, it seemed like at Real Effects, it was such a unique place to work because they did want to they wanted to save people from not being artists. They wanted to find those people that could, make the team better, but really gel with the team and make cool stuff. And their bread and butter was commercial work, working on 100 different commercials, and it'd be, special effects for a Nerf gun shot, right? Yeah. Is one job you'd have one day, and then the next day you'd have to animate, figure out how does living guacamole look like. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So you guys are just general concept artists in this, or general visual development? Is that kind of your title there?
Yeah, I mean, Real Effects was this melting pot of just anything. I mean, because they had a partnership with William Joyce, who is a very famous children's book illustrator and aspiring filmmaker at the time. That guy had his fingers in all sorts of pies and was creating these worlds that were just like an artist's dream. Mm-hmm. And so he had a relationship with the company heads. Mm-hmm. And so we were, at one point we're doing Nerf gun commercials, and at the other point we're developing,
Guardians of the Childhood.
It was called Guardians of the Childhood that became Legend of the Guardians eventually.
Yeah.
So we were doing that.
Before it was at DreamWorks, we were developing that film.
One of my first sort of dream moments was what William Joyce, he kept us after hours it was Jake, I think you were there too. And he was like showing us storyboards from Robots, which was in development at the time at Blue Sky Studios. And for me, it was like a dream come true, because I was like, I've never been in anything like this. And now I'm getting to see this stuff before it even, it's even in a reel, you know, an animation reel from a major studio. So
right. I think what would you say the lesson you learned there from real effects was?
Well, gosh, there was so many. What I would say the big lesson that I would give everyone else is that you don't need to go and jump into a major studio to find your footing in your career. Real effects, if I didn't have that, it was like my second school, because a lot of the stuff I did there I hadn't done in college. So if you can find a place that fosters talent, that builds you up, that basically says, we want to help you, we want you to be great, because if you're great, then we're great, you know. That type of studio isn't your major studios. You know, if you just go right from school into Disney, you're not going to necessarily have that environment. So for me, that was huge. And, you know, one of my big inspirations was Don Bluth, you know, who was this big time animator when I was a kid. He went straight to Disney out of high school. And so, Jake, you actually worked for him.
Right.
But for me, I was like, oh, that's it. You know, it's just like, I'll just cut out the middleman. Like that's my way to go, you know. And, you know, 10, 15 years later, still struggling to find it. It's just like, oh no, you don't have to do that. In fact, I would recommend not doing that, you know.
So
Do
let
you
me
guys
ask you
still
this.
have your living guacamole images?
Oh boy. So
Did you save that,
I will say
Jake?
that the commercial was for chips, I think Tostitos or something like that. And it was like, the chips are so good, the guacamole like wants to be on the chip. and so that was like the pitch, the brief. And so they're like, all right, our department, make guacamole that wants chips, that loves it. And so I remember doing like animation, because it was too hard to storyboard it. So I was doing animation where like the chips coming down to the bowl and the guacamole's like rising up to like be in it all sultry and like seductively.
Wow.
Yeah, it was messed up.
It's funny to talk about those kind of jobs, because there is a disconnect, I think, in school, where in school it's almost like just every assignment is sort of your dream job. And your goal is to make it as pretty as possible. And it's always, hey, do it in your style. You be you, bro. And, you know, it's all about you. And then there's this period of like 3 or 4 years outside of school that I think everybody goes through, where it's all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, I've got to do this really specific thing. It's not my style. I don't know how to do it. And it'd be funny to get a collection of those jobs from all the illustrators we know. I know I've talked about it on this podcast before, but I had one where I had to illustrate a tooth riding a motorcycle, holding a toothbrush. You know, it's just like, I would never draw that in a million years. And it was a real struggle for me. It's one that if I was in school and the teacher gave me that, I would have just taken the F. I would have just drawn my own thing, and like, that's just not for me, man. It's not my style, you know, all the college kind of attitude. But then when you get there, you got to perform. And I love what you're saying about that, because like now you got to figure out, oh wait, I've never drawn, you know, water hitting a beach before. I've never drawn something in the fog. I've never drawn a tooth on a motorcycle, you know, like, or guacamole that's alive. And that's the stuff where you really start to figure out, like, how do I work? How do I make something that's at least presentable in this scenario? And then later you get this confidence that there is nothing that you could be given that you couldn't at least do something pretty good with.
Yeah. I think there's also just a maturing that happens, you know. Any professional artist, it's either the machine chews you up and spits you out, or you make it through, you know, because I think there are some artists that are just like, I just can't do it. I just can't sell out, you know. And so they end up just going crazy and saying, I don't want to make money doing this thing. But yeah, once money is introduced, then it's like, well, I got to give the public what they want. So, you might do sort of what Jake does, where I think you have a nice balance of, you've created a career around, your own style. You're able to sell you and what you love to do. And I do think that there, at some point, money follows passion. If you're passionate about something and you love to draw it, and that's what you do all the time, that companies are going to start hiring you to do what you love to do. But at the same time, I think along that pathway, if you really don't want the industry to chew you up and spit you out, you've got to be able to sort of go, you know what, I'm going to make this tooth holding a toothbrush, the best. I'm going to do it
this is a portfolio piece,
right? Yeah. Yeah,
that's for sure.
And then,
so
go ahead.
what would you say is the state of the feature animation industry right now? Is it healthy? Is it sick? Does everything run along just fine, or is there areas for improvement? And any thoughts on Netflix?
Well, thankfully I'm not there. That's my first thought on Netflix. Just because I think that they're going for some. So given the latest news with Netflix, I'm unsure, because look, I mean, one of the problems on my film, because it's a lower budget film and it's a shorter period of time, like, it's really hard to get artists because there's so much work out there, especially for story artists. I mean, they've got the pick of the litter. So, I mean, those that are coming out of school right now, it's for them, I think it's going to be a really positive experience, because right now there's a ton of stuff right there. Even with what's happening at Netflix, I think it's still that way.
You want to do just a quick rundown of what happened at Netflix, just for people who may not know anything about that?
Yeah. So I know that I don't know everything, because I didn't do a deep dive news wise, but I know that they changed out their animation executive, at least one of the executives, and they ended up shutting down quite a few shows. They've also been accused of fudging the numbers a little bit in order to make certain decisions. I was already skeptical about those numbers. We got those numbers on our movie because, they do these little, get-togethers to say, this is how many people watched your show, and this is
right. 5 minutes counts as an entire, like, a full watch,
right,
stuff like that.
And but they don't know how many eyes have seen it, because accounts wise, like how many people watch it on a particular account. And that's the other thing. The other issue with Netflix is they had like a $200,000 viewership drop in January. So their stock fell like 30%, I heard last.
What was interesting was you have, Disney, Pixar, Illumination, Sony, DreamWorks, used to be Blue Sky, but those are like all the top feature animation studios, right? Yep. And then Netflix says, well, we're doing feature animation now. And they grabbed all this top talent and brought them in. And so everyone's like, oh, it's going to be this new place where, interesting creative things can happen. It's a different kind of studio. All these, they're pulling art directors from Disney, and they're pulling art directors from Pixar, and bringing all these people in to make stuff. But then there was, I think, little oversight too on what they're making, little executive vision as well, and then Netflix is at the whim of they're not primarily a studio that makes content; they're a studio that licenses content, and so they're not in it. I think for the it's a different model than, say, a DreamWorks, right? Which just straight up makes stuff.
And now there's so many other companies now that are jumping into streaming that's become a competition for them that they never had before. HBO Max is sort of this dark horse that's coming up, and so yeah, I mean it's a landscape that's so different. I think that's why they lost a lot of their viewership, but it's not the same landscape anymore at all. It's not like feature versus television. Now there's this wild west in between that everyone's trying to figure out. So,
because TikTok is also like people are spending 3 or 4 hours on TikTok instead of watching a movie. So does it make sense to spend $80 million on an animated feature when eyeballs are just scrolling through, social media, right?
Yeah, I mean, the feature industry for a long time, even before COVID, was struggling. I think COVID kind of sent it into light speed. And now it's like, how many people are really spending that money to go sit in a theater for 2 hours with their kids, for animated films? When, like you're saying, it's like you're spending hours on TikTok. You have small spurts that you can just watch on your phone. Now shows like Turning Red, which I loved as animated film, they just put it out in Disney Plus. I didn't pay anything for it. I mean, paying my subscription for it, but those are the type of movies that were events that you would go to a theater and spend money, so yeah, it's for artists. I think it's still a great landscape because there's so much opportunity out there. Theatrical release, like big event films, there's going to be less and less of those, because it's going to be the giants. They're going to gamble that and roll the dice on those.
Where does a movie like Turning Red, I understand how movies make money in the theater, and I understood it when it was released like on Amazon Prime and people got to just buy it. It's available for streaming. Where does the money come from when it's just it comes with a subscription like Disney Plus? Is Disney buying? I just don't understand that mechanism. If they sort of made the movie and then they put it out on the subscription service, does the subscription cover it? And people already have the subscription. So I'm just confused on how the money works.
Yeah, I would be guessing. I mean, I know the Netflix model has always been about more subscribers. So I'm assuming Disney has a little bit of that in their business model as well. And putting something like that on streaming is going to bring in more subscribers.
And keep subscribers too. That's another problem is people will, like with Netflix, I mean, our habit is we subscribe for a month or 2 months at a time and then unsubscribe because we may not, like there's nothing we want to watch on Netflix right now. So why are we paying for it? And then we'll be like, oh, there's a movie that's going to be released on Netflix. It's got Ryan Andrews or what's his name? Ryan
Reynolds.
The most famous Hollywood actor right now with the Stone or the Rock. And and so we'll subscribe to watch that and then unsubscribe again. And so it's in a streaming service's best interest to be like, well, next month it'll be this. Next month we're releasing that. So you can't unsubscribe. But how does you were at Sony for 10 years. While you were there during your tenure at Sony, how does a studio release back to back the Emoji Movie and then Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse? How does something like that happen?
Oh man, you just dove into I don't want to dive in too much. It's look, it just goes to show that it's not necessarily the executives that are the bringers of great material. I mean, it comes down to the filmmakers, right? So, I mean,
are you saying one of those films was executive led and one was more filmmaker led? Is that what you're saying? And people can kind of figure out which one's which.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. So one of them was a obvious cash grab, and the other one was a gamble. And I mean, when you put Phil Lord and Chris Miller behind a comedy animated film, it's almost always a win. And that one, even I was skeptical of, just because it was material that, first of all, a multiverse, which is, I mean, that just opens up so many possibilities. But also it's
sideways.
It's like a pet project. I'm like, I don't know, are they going to be able, I can see them taking a Lego movie, which is sort of this nothing, and then making it something incredible, as opposed to Spider-Verse. So yeah, it was a surprise for me as well. I knew it was going to be better than the Emoji Movie, but I had no idea that it was going to be as successful as it was. And a lot of times those guys come in at the absolute last hour and pull everything together. It's like, it's just madness, and it just looks like chaos, and everyone's like, this is going to be the biggest failure. And then it's just like, it's like come together.
It's that last coming together. Is that all happening in the editing room, or is it all hands on deck? We now figured out it's a Stegosaurus. We're leaning into it. We need spikes. We need plates. We need a tiny little skull.
I don't know. I'd love to be. I mean, I've only just been Phil and Chris adjacent, because I've just been at the studio while they're working on stuff. I've never been in the room with them. So I would love to see exactly why that is. My assumption is that it's sort of like organized in Phil's head, and he's just sort of like letting them just like run around with their hair on fire. And eventually he's like, don't worry, we got this. And then he brings it together. But it also is just an artist process. I mean, we all know that it looks like you've completely lost an illustration, and then suddenly it's just like, whoop, it comes back together. And you're like, oh, okay. Phew, all right, we're good.
Yeah.
Looking at your website, you have a very talented person we are talking to right now. You have so many different styles, and it looks like skill sets. What's your favorite thing to work on? Because you're a great illustrator, a great painter, obviously a great storyboard artist too. What do you find the most enjoyment in?
I do love story most. It's what I get most. It's weird, because I can sit down and write script pages and have just as much fulfillment as I do drawing. So it's one of the reasons why I went away from the painting stuff, just because that story just called to me, But the illustration stuff now for me has just become it's like a meditation. I don't get paid for it. Not yet. I mean, I might end up doing some children's book stuff, but I can just put my headphones on. I don't have to think about anything except, colors, and that to me is more relaxing and less stressful than story. Story is so engaging. You can't listen to music. You have to just be fully mentally into it. Even storyboarding it. So
what led to that? Because that's a big decision. I mean, I've known you forever as like a pretty darn good artist. Of course, you've always had good storytelling chops, performance. There's always a performance aspect with you as well, as far as the storytelling and things like that. So you have all these skills, and I've been in that position too, where it's like, I love comics, I love illustration, I love animating things is fun. Storyboarding seems really cool. Where did you have to draw the line? Why did you have to draw the line, and how did you make that decision?
Yeah, unless you work for a place like a Real Effects, I think you do have to draw a line, because not at every studio you're allowed to have sort of this garage band style where everybody's jumping into everything. Yeah. And that's another advantage to working at a smaller company like that, is you can kind of find your path. But I think the more money that gets involved, the more contract involved and things like that, you do have to kind of hone your skills a little bit.
Specialize.
I've seen it with everybody. Specialize, exactly. I'm not sure what well, I shouldn't say, I'm not sure. I wanted to direct. That was my biggest desire eventually, was to direct. And I think story encompasses the most stuff in a production, to where it makes for a cleaner path to directing. Usually you're going to go from a storyboard artist to possibly a head of story, and then a co-director position or director position. Because story is such an important part of the process. It makes sense that that's where the directors often come from, is that path.
It's rare that you see a director get pulled from the art department to go direct something. If anything, they're going to co-direct the art side of things, and I worked with one, Steve Martino at Blue Sky, and he co-directed with Jimmy, I forget his last name, but one
Hayward?
was kind of, Hayward. Yeah. Do you know him?
No, but he directed Time Turkeys after Freebirds after I left.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I know of him.
Right. So one was clearly a story guy, one was clearly an art guy. And so me being the art department, a lot of times would only work with Steve instead of Jimmy. Every time Jimmy would come in, he'd have interesting ideas and different things, but he was so much on the story side. Those two were like the odd couple. One was like perfectly straight laces, the other one was like ripped jeans, and to have those two work together, it's amazing.
Did they work well together?
We got. Yeah.
That's the other thing too. If you have I was going to say co-directorship, I mean, it's a marriage for sure. Like anybody that's going into that type of relationship, you better make sure that you are like in sync, to me, or that you've delineated your stuff so well that you're not stepping on each other's toes, because it definitely takes a united front to do that.
That's great. For all you, everybody listening to this episode here that's in in the running for a co-director position at an animated film, it's really good advice to listen to from Brandon.
Who knows? That might be their future. You never know. I'm telling you now before you do it.
It's true.
I have a practical question. On this podcast, we talk a lot about the realities of living as an artist, not just the art side of it, but being an artist and affording things and getting paid and, all that kind of stuff. Does, your path in these studios as a storyboard artist, then go into head of story, then go into co-director, are we looking at huge leaps of it? Like when I hear the word director and I'm thinking feature film or films in general, I'm thinking you're loaded. Drinks on you today? Did it go up like that, or was it just like a little incremental bump? Like, I could
trade in his Camry for a Bentley.
It is not
right,
like
exactly.
At all. That's awesome. I love it. Well, that's another reason why no one really wants to be an animation director. It's definitely a job of passion, and you just got to love what you do. And there was one point when it could have happened, when animation directors could have been part of the Directors Guild, the live action Directors Guild, and then that would have made a big difference. But that's a whole other story for another day. But that never happened, and no, we're not at all. It's not like I'm out on the street corner, but yeah, it's living comfortably, but I living comfortably in LA. That's
right. Okay.
That's the other thing too, is cost of things out here. But anyway,
yeah, for sure.
And I would say too, like there is incremental things, but that living comfortably in LA doesn't, I don't think, happen until you're in more of a leadership position at one of these animation studios. Up until then, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, if you have family, maybe, you know, if you have a family, maybe your wife should be working as well, or maybe your husband should be working, and
Exactly.
divide, you know, sort of a division of labor with the home stuff while that happens.
Yeah. So like, you know, I've got 4 kids. I live LA close. I'm in Simi Valley, but you know, I'm able to own a house, which is a crazy expense. So, you know, it's okay living, and my wife doesn't work. So, you know,
you got a fishing boat
right.
too. So that's something.
Nice.
No, I do not. I mean, I sort of have
houses all over the world. So
yeah, Jake's making fun of me. I have an inflatable boat that I sort of like, I pimped out to be a fishing boat. Anyway, whatever.
It's like one of those tubes you strap on. It has a motor on it. It's an ice cooler tied
if it
to
floats, that's a boat.
Oh, whatever.
If it floats, that's a boat. That's our new motto.
That's our quote.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for meeting with us, Brandon. This was nice. Always nice to talk to you. We gotta hang out in person one of these days.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me on. It was a blast.
That's awesome.
Right on.
Good to see you, man. That was great.
All right.
Yeah. So what's the rest of the day look like for you?
Meetings. I actually we're having a cartoon watching party this afternoon with cereal. So that's a
bring your own box of cereal.
No, I bought a bunch of cereal actually for it, but we're watching a bunch of Looney Tunes shorts. So
how big's your team now?
Oh gosh, our story team is now up to 8. And then we've got a ton of design. I think we've got like 6 designers so far, background and whatnot, and then more starting next week. So
cool.
Production wise, there's another half dozen or so.
I was going to ask you, maybe we'll keep this in the episode. Do you need to live in LA to work in LA?
No, but that might change.
Okay.
So the whole hybrid thing opened itself up to, when I say hybrid, I mean, you know, being able to work from home, or I should say not hybrid, the working remotely really opened it up for people. So we have 2 designers on our show that actually live in an RV and go wherever they want.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, but that might change because, you know, there's been an announcement at our studio that they want people to start coming in 3 days a week. So really do what I call the hybrid thing. But I don't know how that's going to be enforced, or, you know, if unless they do it industry wide.
Yeah.
Seems like it's not attainable. Now, there are people that do plenty of freelance, you know, and do and have a regular gig. They're just not union people, and not all studios will hire you if you're not union. So it gets a little trickier.
Yeah,
it does. I think it's helpful to live out here.
Okay, so that was Brandon Jeffords. Always good to talk to him. Always great fun. Interesting thing there at the end too about living in LA, because that's a big question. Do you have to make the move out there to work there? And it sounds like moving forward, at least 3 days out of the week, you're going to have to live in LA.
Right. It's interesting to compare that to some of the other areas in illustration. I mean, like 20 years ago, to be an editorial illustrator, you'd sort of have to be in New York where all the stuff is happening. And, you know, children's books also mainly in New York. That's gone, of course, now. But it's funny that animation definitely has that.
I think
one thing that was cool.
Well, I was going to say, I think it is because it's so collaborative.
Makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. You're a team. But speaking of that, one thing that my takeaway from talking to him is that, nice guys do finish first in this industry. He's just such an easy person to talk to. And, you look at his resume, he's done a ton of stuff and he's just the most down to earth. You could see how it would be easy to work with him in a group. You know what I mean? And he could, he seems competent and like he's sure of himself, but there's no arrogance to it. He just seems like a nice guy who knows what he's doing. It's pretty neat.
Right. I want to add too, this was one observation, and I didn't really bring it up in the conversation, but this is a guy who's completely abandoned social media because it didn't serve a purpose for his goal, right? So his goal was to become a great storyboard artist, move up to head of story, move up to co-directing, directing animated films. And that is all about having the right skills and having the right network and kind of the social skills needed in that industry. And they're not searching for, the producer or the executives who are trying to figure out who are we going to put in head of story aren't going on social media looking for anybody new to put in there. They're looking at the team that's there and saying who's got leadership skills, who's got, just the great chops, great storytelling chops, and let's put them into that spot. And so it's if you're wondering where does social media, where does self-promotion, where does that stuff fit into my career, take a look at your goals and see how that actually, whether it serves you or whether it takes time away from what you're trying to do. And if he was like always trying to post on Instagram and trying to do Instagram reels now and stuff like that, he wouldn't be able to focus on the skills he actually needs to do the job that he wants to do.
I'll tell you one thing that perked my ears up is that he's a teacher. And he said he teaches it at USC. I'd love to have him teach, a workshop or a video or something like that. I think we gotta get him back.
We did use him early on. There's a Brandon Jeffords demo that we have early on in our.
I've not even seen that. Where?
Yeah,
it must be
if you dig back into the archives of SVSLearn, you can see some stuff. But yeah,
we got to have him on in a serious way now that we're basically at the same level as USC.
Yes. Yeah. Like, why are you wasting your time at USC? You can come over here. We don't even know what USC stands for. Yeah. SVS. Those are the 3 letters you want to worry about. All right. Should we wrap it up?
Let's wrap.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn, where becoming a great illustrator starts. Brandon Jeffords, I'll just say, if you want to check out his work, go to brandonjeffords.com. Check it out there, and you'll see what this guy's capable of. But your hosts today have been Lee White and Jake Parker. Again, Will Terry couldn't join us. You can find Will Terry's work at willterry.com. You can find Lee White's work at leewhiteillustration.com, and you can find my stuff at mrjakeparker.com. Podcast produced by Daniel Tu. That's danieltu.co. It's his website, daniel2.co. Special thanks to Master of Production, David Bro. Keeper of the Curriculum, Austin Shirtliff. Chief Operations Officer, Lisa Fott. And a thank you to Lily Howell for our show notes. Now, go draw something.
If I hit Command, Option, and Control, it brings up a little picker, a little color picker, and a palette. And so
those
I use
3 keys.
Yeah, Command, Option, and Control will bring that up, and you can. I use it all the time. It speeds up your painting.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know Photoshop could do this. I'm doing it right now. Gosh, dang
what was
it!
Again, Command, Option, what?
Command, Option, Control. I'm sure it's the equivalent. Control, Alt, maybe Option for the keyboard for the PC. I'm not totally sure what it is on the PC, but man, oh man, do I use it all the time.